You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision, like engineering. You break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is.
Right, it's very clear cut.
Exactly. But then you look at what the ultra-wealthy are doing right now to extend their lives, and things get wildly paradoxical. Picture this. Billionaires, the people with access to the absolute bleeding edge of medicine, are currently spending hundreds of millions of dollars on lung transplants.
Yeah, they are completely convinced that swapping out their lungs is like the ultimate biohack for life extension.
Right, and it's treated as this straightforward mechanical swap.
It is. A broken part is replaced with a fresh one, and suddenly the clock is reset. I mean, it's a very comforting, very visible action that creates the illusion of control over our biology.
But according to the stack of research we have for today's deep dive, that comforting action might actually be a fatal trap.
Oh, absolutely. And the sources we're looking at today are fascinating.
Yeah, we are diving into excerpts from a provocative December 2025 paper titled Artificial Lung, The Science of the External Lung and Human Evolution Beyond the Toxin Saturation Point. It's by Fuchi Wu, and we're pairing that with a technical blueprint for a device called the Air Eight-Zero Maze Purifier.
Right, and these documents propose a controversial new biological framework that completely upends our understanding of human aging.
So our mission today is to figure out why these billionaire biohackers with all their resources might actually be accelerating their own demise.
And, we'll explore this radical engineering concept that claims to be the true key to unlocking human longevity.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Why would getting a brand new set of lungs be considered the biggest misunderstanding in human history?
Well, to understand that, we have to completely reframe how we view organ failure itself. The core thesis across this research is that lungs do not fail because of age.
Right, which is what we usually think, right? Just wear and tear over time.
Exactly, but the author says they don't fail because of genetics or bad luck or the natural passage of time. They fail because of a very specific mathematical threshold called the toxin saturation point.
The toxin saturation point. I mean, that implies it's not a biological clock ticking down inside your cells, but more like a cup filling up from the outside.
That's exactly it. The author argues that treating lung decay as a natural aging process is just fundamentally flawed. The lungs are really just the first organs to collapse under a relentless, invisible assault from modern environmental toxins.
Wow. So we're talking about ultrafine particles here, right? Like the PM0.1 scale?
Yes, PM0.1. These are so incredibly small, they bypass all of our natural evolutionary defenses. And then you add volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, slipping directly into the bloodstream.
And aerosols sticking like glue to the alveolar walls, not to mention the chemical compounds in everyday perfumes breaking down cellular integrity.
Right, and the invisible toxic gases that constantly build up inside our cars and homes.
The text uses this really striking analogy for this. It says, getting a lung transplant to fix this environmental damage is like a warrior who keeps swapping out a broken shield without ever stopping to figure out where the arrows are flying from.
Yeah, you just keep buying new shields.
But wait, I have to push back here. If you have a perfectly fresh shield, shouldn't it at least buy you a decent chunk of time? Why is the author so adamant that a fresh lung doesn't even work as a temporary fix for these billionaires?
Because the arrows never, ever stop, and their velocity is actually increasing. I mean, you take roughly 20,000 breaths a day.
You are breathing right now.
Exactly. The PM0.1 particles, the nanometer scale toxins down to PM0.00001, the secondhand smoke. These invisible threats are constant and ubiquitous in modern industrial civilization.
So when that billionaire wakes up from their $100 million transplant, their brand new lung just immediately starts absorbing the exact same fatal doses of toxins from day one.
Precisely. The battlefield hasn't changed at all. The environmental assault is identical.
You're just offering up a new, highly vulnerable target to the exact same firing squad.
And that external environmental failure immediately triggers a catastrophic internal biological failure. The sheer volume of modern air pollution guarantees the new lung will march toward its own toxin saturation point at an accelerated rate.
Just because the body is already in a state of crisis.
Right.
Okay, so the new lung is still getting attacked from the outside by the air, but what is happening on the inside? Because the research paints a pretty grim picture of the biological reality of these procedures. It calls it the body's counterattack.
Well, the immune system doesn't understand that this new organ costs $200 million and is supposed to save your life. Its very first reaction to this foreign tissue is absolute hostility.
It identifies the new lung as an alien invader.
Exactly. So to even maintain a temporary ceasefire, the patient has to take intense, highly toxic immunosuppressant drugs for the rest of their life.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The author explicitly calls this trading lives rather than treating a disease. To keep this foreign lung, you basically have to sacrifice your other organs.
Yeah, it's a brutal trade-off.
Walk us through the biological mechanics of this secondary destruction, because it sounds like a complete cascade failure.
Oh, it absolutely is a systemic cascade effect. Those immunosuppressants cause incredible collateral damage by essentially blinding your body's natural defense mechanism.
And overtaxing your filtration systems, right?
Right. The liver, which is forced to process these heavy synthetic drugs daily, begins to struggle and eventually fail. Then, kidney function rapidly declines due to the nephrotoxic nature of the medication.
Oh, wow.
And we see massive bone density loss leading to accelerated osteoporosis because the drugs disrupt normal calcium metabolism.
That's wild.
And it gets worse. Without a functioning immune system, the risk of developing rapid onset cancers skyrockets. Plus, your vulnerability to opportunistic infections becomes so high that a common, everyday cold can easily become lethal.
That is just terrifying. You're trying to outrun respiratory failure by systematically destroying your liver, your kidneys, and your skeletal system.
And the data totally reflects this grim reality. The sources reveal a dark, rarely discussed medical statistic.
Right, the lifespan stat.
Yeah. Despite all the wealth and medical intervention, the average lifespan after a lung transplant is only 5.5 years.
5.5 years.
Yeah.
After all that money, the intense surgery, and the constant suffering of immune suppression, why is it so incredibly short?
The primary culprit is, well, it's chronic rejection. Even under the heavy blanket of immunosuppressants, the body's microscopic surveillance never truly stops. Macrophages and other immune cells slowly, relentlessly attack the foreign lung tissue.
So they're constantly fighting it.
Yeah, and over time, this chronic inflammation causes the delicate, spongy tissue of the alveoli to harden and become fibrosed. The body lays down stiff collagen across the lung architecture.
Literally strangling the organ from the inside out until it can no longer expand or exchange oxygen. So the body is essentially burying the new lung alive in scar tissue. And on top of that, I mean, you can't just 3D print a fresh, pristine lung yet. This organ is coming from another human being.
Right. It comes from a deceased donor, which means it carries its own hidden history of damage.
Right, because that tissue might harbor latent viral infections or unseen cellular aging or microscopic damage from the donor's past environmental exposures.
Exactly. The new lung arrives already, like partially full of its own toxins. The patient is simply trading a known toxin saturation point for an unknown one in this blind, desperate transaction.
So if our biology fundamentally cannot handle this toxin saturation, and we can't biohack our way out with transplants because of the immune cascade, how do we intercept the damage before it enters the body?
And that is exactly where the concept of an external lung comes in. It shifts entirely away from biology and dives straight into engineering.
This is the paradigm shift the author introduces.
Right. If the internal war is unwinnable, you have to move the battlefield. The external lung is conceptualized as a scapegoat organ.
A scapegoat organ. I like that. Like a replaceable black box designed specifically to intercept, absorb, and endure the chemical and particulate assault before those toxins ever reach the human respiratory system.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for us? It's like sending a drone into a highly radioactive zone instead of sending a human in a hazmat suit. The author points out a massive design flaw in human anatomy.
We took our absolute most vulnerable organ, the lung, with its massive surface area of delicate one-cell thick tissue, and we put it right on the front lines against modern chemical civilization.
We are exposing raw biology to industrial exhaust every single second of our lives.
Right.
And the economic disparity between the two approaches is just staggering.
Oh, completely. The billionaire is spending hundreds of millions of dollars to wage a deadly internal war with a borrowed organ that will fail in 5 years.
While the alternative proposed by these engineering blueprints is a mass-producible device that costs a fraction of that. Tens of thousands instead of hundreds of millions.
Right, and the explicit design goal is that the real biological lung only ever receives air with 0% toxins.
The psychological shift here is fascinating too. This device isn't framed as a medical treatment or a therapy for sick people. It is conceptualized as anti-toxin armor for human civilization at large.
Because it operates entirely outside the body, it completely bypasses the nightmare of organ rejection. It requires zero immunosuppressants.
Your liver and kidneys remain safe. And when this external black box finally reaches its own toxin saturation point, you don't need a surgeon. You just throw the module away and snap in a new one.
You let the machine die for you. The transition from biological repair to environmental interception really solves the fundamental problem that billionaires are ignoring.
Okay, but I have to lean in here and push back on behalf of the listener, because claiming absolute 0% toxins is a massive, highly suspicious promise.
It is a bold claim.
Right. We've all bought air purifiers that claim to clean the room, and the dust still settles. How exactly does this specific black box actually pull microscopic killers out of the air in real time without just becoming a clogged, useless brick?
Well, let's dig into the actual engineering of the Air Eight-Zero Maze Purifier. The engineering principles outlined in the blueprints are highly specific and move far beyond standard HEPA filtration.
Okay. So how does it work?
Let's methodically unpack its 5-stage purification architecture. Stages 1 and 2 form the initial defense perimeter, functioning as dual ionization zones.
Dual ionization zones. Got it.
These stages capture the larger threats like dust, pollen, and microplastics, but their primary role is to actively neutralize pathogens and give all the remaining microscopic aerosols and nanometer toxins a strong negative electrical charge.
Wait, hold on. If we're using dual ionization zones and creating high-energy electrical fields right at the intake, aren't we just generating ozone, which is itself a highly toxic respiratory irritant?
That's a great point.
Yeah, how does the engineering account for that, so we aren't just trading PM 0.1 particles for immediate ozone poisoning?
The design actually addresses that directly. Instead of venting that transient ozone out into the breathable air, the system utilizes it within the enclosed catalytic chamber.
Oh, interesting.
The ozone generated by the ionization process becomes an active cleaning agent. It's, deployed specifically to break down complex VOCs before the air ever reaches the final output stage.
So it uses the byproduct of stage 1 as the weapon for stage 2.
Exactly. And this ionization prepares the air for the core magic of the system, which is the labyrinth in stages 3 and 4.
The tox box.
Right, the tox box. Once the charged air enters the tox box, the fluid dynamics change entirely. The system forces the airflow through a microscopic labyrinth containing over 60 sharp, high-velocity turns and perforations.
I was trying to visualize this when looking at the diagrams. Imagine a microscopic pinball machine where the walls act like high-powered magnets. It's less like a net-catching fish and more like flying a swarm of negatively charged gnats through an incredibly complex maze made entirely of industrial flypaper.
That is a great analogy. The air can easily navigate those 60 sharp turns, but the heavier particles carrying that negative charge cannot overcome their own inertia.
They are physically forced to crash into the walls of the maze.
And those walls are positively charged electrodes. When those negatively charged nanometer toxins slam into the positively charged walls, the blueprints describe a fascinating detail called microscopic electroplating.
Microscopic electroplating. So the toxins are instantly physically bound to the electrodes through massive electrostatic attraction. Nothing escapes the magnetic pull.
Exact.
But wait, doesn't a filter like that get clogged instantly? Even with electrostatic attraction, if you are essentially electroplating toxins onto a metal wall, eventually the wall is completely covered in a layer of grime, rendering the positive charge useless, right?
That is exactly what happens in standard electrostatic precipitators. But the tox box introduces an ingenious, self-purifying mechanism called electrochemical oxidation.
Okay, electrochemical oxidation. How does that work?
By applying a specific electrical potential to the electrodes, the system generates highly reactive oxygen species directly at the surface level.
So how does that actually clean the wall?
Well, when an organic molecule, like a benzene ring from car exhaust, hits that charged surface, the intense electrical field actually rips the carbon bonds apart.
Whoa. So it doesn't just hold the toxin, it fundamentally disassembles it at the molecular level.
Exactly. It instantly converts the complex organic toxins into harmless trace amounts of carbon dioxide and water vapor.
It's essentially incinerating them at a microscopic scale while it runs.
Yes, it creates a self-purifying filtration layer. The physical absorption capacity never diminishes because the captured material is constantly being destroyed.
Converted into harmless gas.
Right. The result of this continuous, non-degrading process is what the blueprint calls the 8 zeros. The output air is theoretically entirely free of dust, germs, toxins, smoke, odors, heavy metals, microplastics, and aerosols.
Wow. So, with the technical feasibility of the engineering mapped out, let's pull back, because the implications here for you, the listener, and for humanity as a whole are sweeping.
They really are. The author isn't just presenting a consumer product, they're attempting to redefine human evolution.
Right. The grandest claim within this research is that humanity is undergoing a necessary structural transition.
Think about our biological history. Primitive life relied entirely on basic, built-in internal functions, like the evolution of the kidney to filter blood or the liver to process food.
And modern humanity is defined by the massive metabolic investment in our brain.
But the future of our species, according to this text, relies on what the author terms externalized vital modules.
Externalized vital modules, meaning we stop trying to endlessly upgrade or repair the fragile wetware inside our bodies, and we start outsourcing our baseline survival to durable hardware on the outside.
Exactly.
Think about how much time you spend worrying about aging, diet, or genetics. You stress over your predispositions, the supplements you take. But if this author is right, by simply driving your toxin accumulation rate down to zero, achieving what the blueprints call super heaven air quality, your biological clock fundamentally shifts.
Without the relentless inflammatory response to environmental damage, your natural organs simply stop degrading at their current artificially accelerated rate.
So the true evolutionary leap forward isn't the genetic modification or the surgical hacking the ultra-wealthy are attempting.
No, true evolution in this context is the act of delegation. We are delegating the fatal, mathematically impossible burden of processing the modern world's industrial pollution to a machine.
A machine that doesn't feel pain, doesn't suffer complex immune rejection cascades, and most importantly, is designed specifically to be sacrificed.
We built a highly toxic world, and our biology cannot adapt fast enough to survive it. So we adapt our engineering to serve as the buffer.
We step out of the line of fire. So to bring it all together for this deep dive, we have a situation where billionaires are fighting an unwinnable million-dollar internal war with lung transplants.
They are literally ripping out their lungs, suppressing their immune systems, and suffering through brutal 5.5-year expiration dates as their bodies bury the new organs in scar tissue.
They are trying to survive the battlefield by buying new armor for the very center of their chests, completely missing that the true path to longevity lies in stepping off the battlefield altogether. We externalize our vulnerabilities through these engineered scapegoat organs.
It is a profound philosophical and mechanical shift from desperate biological repair to absolute environmental interception.
It really is. And it leaves me with a final lingering question, and I want you to think about this long after we wrap up today. If we successfully externalize our lungs to act as a shield against the modern world, and it successfully doubles or triples human lifespans, what organ do we externalize next?
That's a huge question.
Right. Do we build an external liver to process the microplastics in our water? An external kidney? If our survival eventually relies more on interchangeable, mass-produced machine modules operating outside of us than our own internal biology, at what point does the human body just become a passenger in its own armor? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.
Air Eight-Zero Maze Purifier. The world's first single-pass purifier. Combining ionization, electrostatics, and airflow maze. The machine replaces humans. To absorb and destroy every toxin, air enters the ion zone. Viruses and dust gain negative charge. They pass electrostatic filters. Then enter the toxbox maze. Aerosols dry on electrode walls, breaking down into CO2 and water. Inside the maze, air twists and strikes over 60 times. Each turn ends a toxin's life. Billions of particles in 0.1 second are fully purified. It releases Earth's purest air. The superheaven air quality. 8-free, dust-free, germ-free, toxin-free. Smoke-free, odor-free, heavy metal-free. Microplastic-free, aerosol-free. Not just an air machine. The only key to lifespan freedom. U.S. Patent No. 8268058B2.